All right, Shabbos. Good morning. Let's begin. Today's daf is Lamed Aleph. A lot to do today. This shir is sponsored by Moshe and Dvorah Werdersheim in the merit of Avram Yeshaya Gershom ben Moshe Mordechai for his success. Good, beautiful sponsorship. Hashem, he should succeed b'chol ma'aseh yodav. Shkoyach. Alright, so it says we left off by the Gemara on Lamed Amud Beis 30b. Atu kol hani da'amrin alav aveidahavu. So we'll say it's about 7 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, the Mishnah gave an example of an aveidah. The example the Mishnah gave was an example of a chamor or a shar or a chamor or a para that were wandering by the road. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. These are the only examples of Aveda. Everything else that we've spoken about until now, a cloak and money and everything else is not an Aveda. This is what it means to say. So rather what the Gemara means to say is the following. What is the klal? What is the general principle of Aveda? That one is chayiv to announce. If a person sees a donkey or a cow grazing by the road, einzu aveda. So we'll say if you find an animal grazing by the road, just in general, that type of behavior is not aveda type behavior. And ultimately, again, one would not be chayiv to take the animal and to go ahead and announce it. Chamor v'kelev havuchin. But if one sees a donkey and ultimately its load is overturned, or para v'ratza ben akramim, or one sees a cow and it's running between the vineyard, so we'll say, remember again, as we spoke about yesterday, running between the vineyard is dangerous for the animal because he get bruised. In addition, ultimately, again, to being destructive for the vineyard itself. Right? And ultimately, this is a type of a behavior that indicates that the animal is an aveda, and you would be chayiv to go ahead and announce it. To which the Gemara says, Uli olam. Now, how long exactly is it that you're seeing these animals do these things before ultimately it's determined to be an aveda? Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, ad shlosha yamin. So Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav that the idea is it's up until 3 days. That if you see an animal engaging in any of these behaviors for 3 or more days, that indicates that lamaisa the animal is an aveda. House of Sahechidami, what's the case? So we'll say if I see an animal out and about at night, so that indicates that it's an aveda. That indicates to me already from the beginning that it's lost. Because again, people don't usually allow their animals out to graze at night. And if the animal is out by day, I don't understand, even if the animal is out grazing for more than 3 days, why should it matter? People let their animals graze all the time during the day. To which the Gemara says, so what happens? The case over here is where I see the animal out before the sun comes up and after the sun goes down. So tlasa yomi, if I see the animal like this for 3 days, amrinad isramu. So if I see it for 3 days, I say, okay, perhaps this is normal type of just animal behavior. The animal's grazing. The nafka tfei vadai avedahi. We'll say, but if I see the animal out before sunrise and after sunset for more than 3 days, then what? That indicates that the animal is an aveda. I'd be obligated to go ahead and take it and try to search out its owner. So the Gemara says, Tanya Nami right? So that supports this. Matzah talis v'kardum. If I find a talis, a cloak, or a kardum is an axe, Dabav Lamed Aleph, Be'isratcha, we'll say Isratcha is a public square, or part of Ratza ben Akramim, or I see a cow running between the vineyards, or in the vineyard, Harezu Aveda. This ultimately, again, is considered to be a lost object. Talis B'tzad Geder. So if I go ahead and I see a cloak by the side of a fence or side of a wall, Kardum B'tzad Geder, or I find an axe by the side of a wall, upara roa bein hakramim, or I see a cow that is grazing between the vineyard, aim zu aveda. And both say this is not considered to be an aveda. So this makes sense. Again, remember, so if the ox or if the cow or the tal is replaced by the wall, then lemaisa, again, that indicates intentional placement, and it's not an aveda. Remember, this case is a cow grazing between the vineyard. Both say that we're going to see there's a chilik between a cow running between the vines and grazing between the vines. Grazing between the vines, apparently according to the Brisa, is fine. Running between the vines, ultimately, again, is where there's the possibility that there may be some kind of sakana for the animal. Gimel yomim ze achar zeh. But if I see these things for 3 consecutive days, Hare zu aveda. Then Abba say ultimately this is called an aveda. So this is just supporting what we just said before. Well, so now the Brisa introduces another interesting halacha, which we'll come back to at a later date, but it's fascinating nevertheless. Ra'a mayim sheshotfin uboin. Well, say let's say I see water beginning to flood my friend's field. Hare ze goder bifnehem. I should go ahead, and goder literally means like erect a wall or a fence. In other words, stop the flow of water. Well, so this is actually a very important yesod, which we'll discuss later on, which is Metzia nichse avera me'ari, or Metzia, I think that's the right lashon. That if I see someone's property being damaged, and I have the ability to stop that damage, that is my halachic imperative. Meaning, let's say, I'll give you just a simple example of this. I go ahead, I walk by Ruvain's house. Ruvain left on his hose. He left the hose on, and the water is just running and running and running. So again, conventional wisdom, people sometimes think is, you know what, it's not my business. It's not my business. I'm just going to keep going. Again, assuming that you know that this wasn't an intentional thing, you can see it's going by his basement window, he's going to start getting flooded. I have a halachic imperative to go and to shut off his water. Because we will say that's again when I see someone about to be damaged and I have the ability to kind of stave off that damage, that's my responsibility. Again, we'll discuss that in depth. I'm a Rava. So Rava says, where do we know this from? That I have to go ahead, I see my friend's field flooding, that I have to step in and try to prevent that from occurring. So Rava says, because the Torah says this is what you will do for any lost object of your brother. The Rabbos Avedas Karka. This comes to include not just a loss of metaltalin, not just a loss of movable property, but even a loss of Karka, even a loss of real property. I'm Rabbi Chanil Rava. Tani the Messiah Lecha. So Rabbi Chananya said to Rava, I have a brace that supports you. Rava Ma'im Sheshotfin Uboin. If I see that the field is being flooded, I should literally, we'll say golder means erect defense. But the idea is I should try to prevent the flooding from occurring. So he says, well, if you're going to bring that price it doesn't necessarily support me. Why? What's the case? We'll say that's a case where there were sheaves in the field. So sheaves, remember, are movable property, are metaltalin. So the Bryce is talking about if I see my friend's metaltalin about to be damaged, I'm obligated to step in and to try to prevent that. We already know about metaltalin. But if there are sheaves and we're talking about saving metaltalin from damage, then what is the chiddush? I will say the cases where there are sheaves, but the sheaves are still attached to the ground. So apparently in this case, which is interesting, is the wheat was bundled while it's still attached to the ground, and ultimately again is waiting to be cut. But the sheaves are still receiving some level of sustenance from the ground itself. So what I've thought, since they still require the ground, perhaps they're considered to be like karka. Kamashma, no. Kamashma, that they're considered to be like metalton. So both say, bottom line is that the brisa that was quoted does not support the idea that Rava espoused. So Rava's idea is correct. Namely, that not only do I have an obligation to save my friend's metaltalin, his movable property, from damage, but also to save his karka from damage, just the brisa that Rava tried to bring doesn't actually support this idea. Fine. Matzah chamaru para. So the Gemara says, Halgufa kasha. The Mishnah seems to be inherently contradictory. How so? Amrit, matzah chamaru para madarach ein zu aveda. On one hand, we said that if you find a chamor, a donkey, or a cow grazing on the road, so this is not considered to be an aveda. This is not demonstrative that the item is lost. Rowan baderach hu lo havi aveda. It's only because it's grazing in the road that it's not considered to be an aveda. Haratza baderach v'roa blesu. Haratza baderach v'roa ben akramim havi aveda. But if it were to be running on the road or grazing within the vineyard, that would be indicative of an aveda. Okay, that's the inference from the Reisha. Yet, Ema Seifa, look at the end of the Mishnah. Chamor v'kelev hafuchim, if you have a donkey and its utensils were overturned, or para ratza ben hakramim, or the cow was running in between the vines, hare zu aveda. This is considered to be an aveda. Ratza ben hakramim hu dahavi aveda. It's only when it's running within the vineyard that it's an aveda. Haratza baderach v'ra ben hakramim ein zu aveda. If it was running on the road, or grazing in the vineyard, it would not be an aveda. So we'll say, so which one is it? Amar Abaye, Yagid alav reo. So we'll say literally the pasuk of Yagid alav reo, the pasuk from Eov. So Yagid alav reo means his companion will tell about it. Although reo in this context actually literally means thunder, but this expression over here means we could understand one part of the Mishnah from the other part of the Mishnah. How so? Tana roa b'derech telo havya aveda. We'll say so. The Mishnah teaches us that if I see an animal grazing on the road, that's not considered an aveda. V'huadin l'roa bin akramim. And this is true if the animal was grazing in the vineyard as well. Tana rotza ben akramim dehavi aveda. But yet again, the Mishnah taught me that if the animal was running in the vineyard, this is considered to be an aveda. V'hu adin l'rotza baderech. And I will say this would be true if what? This is also true if the animal was running on the road. Amrle Rava. So Rava said, "Iyagid alav reo lisni kilsa." The kol shekein chamirta. So we'll say, so Rabbi said, I don't understand. If this is how you're setting up the Mishnah, let the Mishnah write the more machmir case, let the Mishnah write the more mekel case, the more lenient case, and all the more so, the more stringent case. What does that mean? Lisni ratza baderach tahav yaveda. If the Mishnah would have just taught me that what? That if an animal runs on the road, meaning we'll say the act of running, the act of an animal just running indicates that what? The animal is lost. That the animal is lost. So if you taught me that when an animal runs on the road, it's considered to be an aveda, the kol shekein ratza ben akramim. All the more so what? If the animal is running in the vineyard, of course it is considered to be an aveda. Because you also remember again, if running on the road indicates that it's lost, running in the vineyard certainly indicates that it's lost, because running in the vineyard comes with another complication, which is what? The accentuated possibility for injury. So the Gemara says the following: and then also, if you taught me that if the animal is grazing in the vineyard, that's not considered to be an aveda. The kol shekein roa baderech. All the more so what? All the more so if it was grazing on the road. Rather, Rava said, Ratza aratza lokasha. Rather, Rava says there's no contradiction in the cases of running. How so? Ha da'apa lagabe dabra, ha da'apa lagabe masa. This is an incredible yisod. So, when it comes to running, there's a yisod in life also. When it comes to running, everything depends which direction you're running in. Running by itself, says the Gemara, could be a good thing or could be a bad thing. If the animal is running towards the desert, that indicates that it's lost. If it's running towards the city, which indicates that it's running towards its home, then that indicates that it knows its way. An incredible yisod. Therefore, again, running by definition is parv. Everything depends on the nature or the direction in which it's running. So similarly, again, roa aroa namilo kasha. So similarly, grazing also is not a contradiction. How so? Kan ba'avedas gufa, kan ba'avedas karka. Oh, let's listen to this. The Mishnah was dealing with two different types of losses. In certain cases, the concern is with the loss of the animal, and in other cases, the concern is with the loss of the vineyard. So the Gemara says, Ki katani roa baderach lahavi aveda. When we said before that if the animal is grazing on the road, it's not considered to be an aveda. Ha roa ben akramim havi aveda. But if the animal grazes within the vineyard, it is an aveda. What is that? What does it mean when it says if it grazes in the vineyard, it's an aveda? That's not referring to the animal. Rather, avedas karka. It's referring to the vineyard. That if you see an animal grazing in the vineyard, you should step in there, not because the animal is lost, but because the animal may be causing a loss to another person, i.e. the owner of the vineyard. But yet when we learned that if it's running between the vineyards, it is considered to be an aveda. But if it's grazing within the vineyard, it's not an aveda. That's referring what? Ba'avedas gufa. That's referring ultimately again to the animal itself. Bein akramim misakva. So because remember, when it's going ahead and running in between within the vineyard, the animal itself gets bruised. But we'll say if the animal is just simply grazing within the vineyard, it will not get bruised. Meaning the act of getting bruised from the vine is only when the animal ultimately is running. But I don't understand, even if the animal is just grazing within the vineyard, even though the animal is not going to get injured, you should be obligated to step in. Why? To prevent the animal from doing damage to the vineyard itself. To which the Gemara answers, Bidikusi. We're talking about a vineyard of a non-Jew. So I'm not obligated. The mitzvah of Hashavas Haveda, of preventing loss to another person, is only a mitzvah towards another Jew. I'm not obligated to do that for a non-Jew. V'seifokle mishum Haveda skufa the dilma katlula. But I understand I should have to go out and get the cow out of the vineyard while because what's going to happen? When the owner of the vineyard comes along and sees that cow in there, so the kusi is going to say, what is he going to do? He's going to kill the cow. He's going to kill the cow because the cow is trespassing. To which the Gemara says, "Ba'asr de masru v'hada katle." They're dealing with him in a place where they wouldn't first kill the cow. Rather, first they would warn the owner, and then only afterwards kill the cow. V'dilma asruba, but maybe they already warned the owner. I asruba v'lo is darube. Vada aveda midasi. I will say, if we're dealing with a case where the owner of the cow was warned, yet what? He still does not take the necessary precautions, then Lamaisa, that's called an aveda midas. That's called someone who essentially is knowingly giving up or relinquishing his ownership rights, and therefore I have no obligation. Hechzira ubarcha, hechzira ubarcha. So we'll say, now we're going to get to an interesting sugya. So remember, the Mishnah said that if the animal ran away multiple times, I have an obligation to return it, no matter how many times it ran away. So one of the Rabbanan said to Rava, Ema hashev chadazimna teshivim trezimim. So also remember, the lashon by hashavas haveda is hashev teshivim. Maybe it means like this: hashev means the first time he runs away, you have to return it. Teshivim means the second time, but then kamarnu, then we're done. No. So to which Rava responded, no, that's not the drush. Rather, hashev afilu kuf pamim. Mashma. Rather, we'll say hashev is an open-ended word. That means you have to return the animal no matter how many times it runs away. So what do we learn from teshivim? Teshivim, we'll say now the first of the widest lines. Ainli elo lebeso yinas lechabaso. I'm sorry, ainli elo lebeso. I only know that when I return the animal, I have to return it to the home of the owner. I don't know that I can even return it to the property of the owner. The pasuk says you shall return it. What's the case? So we'll say, what's the case? If the garden or if the ruin is guarded, meaning it's secure, then pshita, then of course I could return the lost object there. But if it's unguarded, meaning if it's an open area, then why should I be able to return the lost object there? To which the Gemara answers, Demintra, you're right, it is guarded. Oh, so we'll say, what do we learn from Teshivim? So Hashev teaches me that I have to return the item no matter how many times it runs away or it gets lost. Teshivim means I could return it to any secure location of the owner. But what's the chiddush? The lo ba'inan das bailim. I do not need the owner's knowledge. I don't need his knowledge. So what that means is that halacha l'maisa, I could deposit the lost object on the property of the owner as long as the property is secure, even without the owner's knowledge. So Rabbi Elazar says that normally when returning an object to someone, so for example, if I borrow something from someone, or I'm guarding something for someone, so when I return the object to them, they have to know that I am returning it. I can't return it without their knowledge. The exception to this rule is Hashavas Haveda. Returning of lost object, I can return without the knowledge of the owner, as long as what? I deposit it in a secure location. So we'll say, so now the Gemara is just going to give some other examples of this double lashon. Shaliach to shalach. So we'll say, so this is by shiluach hakan, sending away the mother bird. So shaliach to shalach. Ema shalach chadazimna to shalach trezimni. Maybe shaliach means one time, and to shalach means two times. Meaning, maybe the maximum number of times that I could send a mother away from its nest is two times. To which the Gemara says, no. Not true. We'll say you can do shiluach hakan as many times as you want. So as much as the mother keeps coming back, you can keep going ahead and sending her away. So that's shaliach. Tishalach, ainli elo ledvar reshus. So I only know that I have to do shiluach hakan when I want the chicks or I want the eggs for some mundane purpose, like eating. I want to eat them. However, ledvar mitzvah minayvo. So let's say I want to use it for a carbon. Rashi points out, let's say for the carbon of a mitzvah, I want to use it for a carbon. How do I know that I still have to send away the mother bird? Talmud lomar tishalach mikol makom. Therefore, the pasuk says to shalach, you have to send it. So we'll say the havamina is the mibushiluach hakein is only when I'm taking the birds for mundane purposes, but for a mitzvah purpose, I don't have to send away the mother bird. I could just take the eggs or the chicks. Kamash malan tishalach, even for mitzvah purposes, you have to send away the mother bird first. So one of the rabbis says rather the ima. So we'll say now another example. Hocheach tochiach es amisecha. The mitzvah of tochacha. The mitzvah of rebuke, perhaps one of the hardest mitzvahs in the Torah. Well, I shouldn't say that. Meaning, it comes easily, right, to rebuke someone. But let me rephrase it. Meaning, to actually perform it correctly. Because remember, the point of hochacha is to give someone rebuke in a way that makes them want to do and be better. So this is a very careful art form. So the mitzvah Torah says hochiach tochiach. So why the double lashon? Hochiach chadazimna, tochiach treizimni. So maybe also what this means is if I see someone doing something wrong, hochiach means I have to rebuke them. But the word even rebuke is not really. I don't even like that word because rebuke sounds negative. Really instruct, or advise, right? Advise. Good. So I might have thought hochiach means that there's a cap of 2 times. If I see someone doing something wrong, and first time I'll use the word, I'll give him hochacha, and then if he does it a second time, I do it again. But after 2 times, I'm done. So that's what I would have thought. Amar no, hocheach afilu kluf pamim mashma. I will say it's not true. The mitzvah of hochacha is even 100 times. Tochiach, so let's listen to this. So tochiach means, where do we learn from tochiach? Only Allah harav l'talmid. So I only know that a Rebbe is supposed to give hochacha or tochacha to his talmid, to his student. Talmid l'rav minay. I will say, how do I know that even if the student sees the Rebbe doing something wrong, that the student should give the Rebbe tochacha as well? Talmud lomar hochiach tochiach mikomak. What's an amazing halacha? Amazing halacha because you have to understand the mitzvah of hochiach tochiach asamisecha is a mitzvah of love. It's a mitzvah of love. It's not the pshat that, gotcha. Right? It's a mitzvah that I care about. It says, again, very appropriate to Rabbi Yitzchak's yartzeit, as we spoke about before. So again, if I love someone and I see someone doing something wrong, so I want them to be better because I know the kedusha they have. So therefore the Torah says, you might have thought this only applies from a Rebbe to a Talmud. No, Kamash, no, even from a Talmud to a Rebbe. If a Talmud sees a Rebbe doing something wrong, ultimately, the Talmud has to give the Rebbe proper tochacha, bakavadik tochacha as well. Why? Out of a love for the Rebbe to do the right thing. So the Gemara goes weiter. Azov ta'azov imo. So we'll say, so this is talking about, so if you look at Rashi says, Azov ta'azov is prika. This is by the mitzvah of unloading an animal. That if I see that an animal is buckling under its load, so the halach is Azov ta'azov imo, I have to go ahead and help the owner remove the load from the animal. Ainli ella ba'alavimo. I only know if this is to be true if what? If the owner is with the animal. Because it will say the lashon of the pasuk is azov ta'azov imo. So I only know that I have to help if the owner is present. So she'ela ba'alavimo, shen ba'alavimo minayin. How do I know that even if the owner is not there, I still have to help unload the animal? Talmud lomar azov ta'azov mikol makom. That's the extra ta'azov Rabbi say. Hakim takim imo. Furthermore, again, the pasuk says hakim takim Rabbi say. So Rashi points out hakim takim is te'ina, that if the load fell off the animal, I'm obligated to help put the load back on. So ainli ella ba'alavimo. I only know that's true if what? If the owner is present. She'in ba'alav imo minayin. How do I know that I have to help even if the owner is not present? Talmud lomar hakim takim mikol makom. The additional lashon of takim teaches me that even if the owner is not present, I have to help reload the animal. Now, I want to be clear. When we say present, remember Rashi just points out on this pasuk, he says that if the owner is there and the owner chooses not to help with his own animal, then if the owner doesn't help, I don't have to help. This is talking about the owner is not present. So if the owner is not present, how do I know that I have to help unload or reload the animal? That's the extra word. So Mar goes weiter. Now I will say, now why do I need the Torah to mention this both by Prika and Tina? Why do I need the Torah to mention this both by unloading and loading the animal. I mean, he just teaches me by one of them, and I would have understood that even if the owner is not there, I have an obligation to help out the animal. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Because this Torah would have just taught me about the obligation to unload the animal, even if the owner is not present. I would have said I have to unload the animal. Why? Because there's an issue of tzar b'alei chayim. The animal is suffering under its load. Furthermore, there's an active loss that the owner is going to endure because the animal is buckling under the weight of its load. That's what I'm obligated to go ahead and help out, even if the owner is not there. Aval ti'ina, but also when it comes to reloading the animal, tilav tzar b'alei chayim ika, because the Pashtus, there's no tzar b'alei chayim if the animal doesn't have its load on it. V'lo chisarn kisika, furthermore, there's no loss being caused ultimately to the owner. Ema lo. I would have thought that perhaps if the owner is not there, I am not obligated to participate in this. And if it would have just said Ti'ina Mishum de Bischar. Now the Gemara is going to say something here that we're going to learn later on, which is, I would have thought that if it would have just said by Ti'ina, the reason I'm obligated to help out is because when somebody helps me load my animal, I'm obligated to pay them. Again, we'll talk about the intricacies of that. About prika de bechinam emalo, but prika, which you have to do, unloading the animal, which you have to do even for free. Perhaps again, there is no obligation to do it if the owner is not present. Therefore, tzricha. Therefore, I will say both are needed. Ul Reb Shimon damar aftina bechinam ma'ikal emimar. But according to Reb Shimon, who says that you even have to go ahead and load the animal for free. Then what is there to say? To which the Gemara says, Rav Shimon lo Masai Mikra. According to Rav Shimon, ultimately again, the psukim themselves are not clear. Well, according to Rav Shimon, it's not clear which pasuk is talking about prika, which pasuk is talking about ti'ino, and therefore you need both. To which the Gemara says, Lamali l'michtav hani tartiv l'michtav aveda. So we'll say, so now essentially we have three different psukim. One by prika, which teaches me that if I see the animal buckling under its load, I have to unload the animal, and the chiddush is what? Even if the owner is not present. Similarly, if the load fell off the animal, I'm obligated to help reload the animal, even if the owner is not present. And number three, I'm obligated to go ahead and return a lost animal to the owner, no matter how many times it escapes. So the Gemara says, why do I need all three of these? To which the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Because of Rahman Hani Tardi Mishon the Tzara Demara Isa Tzara Dida Isa. So it says, I might have thought that if it would have written these two, i.e. pre-cantina, I have to help out there. Why? Because there is the tsar of the owner, and there's also the tsar of the animal. Aval aveda, the tsar demara isa, the tsar dida lesa. But I will say, in the case of an aveda, where there's tsar to the owner because he doesn't have his animal, but there's no tsar to the animal, perhaps again I'm not obligated to constantly participate in this mitzvah no matter how many times the animal escapes. Furthermore, had it just taught me aveda, the reason I'm obligated to go ahead and help out is why? Because the owner is not present. Amud beis. Aval hani tarti. Ultimately, again, in these other cases, where presumably under most circumstances the owner is present, perhaps again I'm not obligated to help out. Therefore, tzricha. Therefore, lemaisa again I'm obligated to go ahead and participate. So bottom line, the point you see the pattern over here in the Gemara is all of these cases. The double lashon that's used, we learn something out from the double lashon. So in the case of aveda, hashef teshivim teaches me that's what. That no matter how many times the animal gets lost, so to speak, I'm obligated in Hashavas Aveda. So by Prikin Ti'ina, the double ocean teaches me that even if the owner is not present, I'm obligated to go ahead and help out. Another example, Mos Yumas Hamakeh. So the pasuk says that if somebody killed another individual, so we're obligated to go and put the murderer to death. We execute the murderer. So Mos Yumas Hamakeh. So I only know for the prescribed death penalty. Now, if somebody kills another individual, so the death penalty that Beis Din would administer would be saif, death by a sword. Death by a sword. How do I know that if for some reason we can't administer saif, that you could kill him any other way you want to? Beis Din wants. In other words, how do I know that even if for some reason, I don't know, there's not a sword, whatever it is, right? So how do I know that l'maisa, again, we use a different form of execution to kill him? Which the Gemara says, Talmud Lomar, Mos Yumas Mikomakom. Because the pasuk says, Mos Yumas, he shall surely die. The double lashon teaches me, you execute him however you can. Haketake, so we'll say, Haketake is by Irani Dachos. Right, so remember, Irani Dachos is a city where all of the inhabitants worshipped idolatry. So the halacha is that you wipe out the entire city. Wipe out the entire city. So Haketake, so I only know with the prescribed death penalty. So both say again, that's also by sayif, by sword. So how do I know? Well, so how do I know that if for some reason I can't execute them by sword, that I could go ahead and kill out the city by any means at my disposal? Talmud Lomar, Hake, Take, Mikom Makom. So we'll say, see, you see the pattern over here. So you see the pattern that wherever you see the additional lashon, right, which at first glance appears to be extraneous, is giving you more leeway. Well, it depends how you interpret it, but in these cases, it's giving you more leeway in the manner or method ultimately of execution. So the Gemara goes weiter. So Hashev, Tashiv, Ainli Ella. So this is talking about over here of if you took collateral from someone. So if you took collateral, so the Torah says that you're obligated to go ahead and give back the collateral. So what this is talking about over here is the following. Let's say I took someone's pajamas. I took their pajamas as collateral. So the Torah requires me that every single night I have to go back. Let's say I took it from Ruvain. I have to go back to Ruvain's home and give him back his pajamas. And then the next morning, I could go back and get them back from him. So I'm using pajamas, but same idea. If I borrowed his, if I took as collateral his suit, and he has one suit that he wears to work, I could take it at night, but by day I have to give it back to him. So Hashev Tashiv, I have to give him back the collateral. So it says the Gemara, Emi Ela Shemashachno B'Rishus Bezdin. This only tells me collateral that I took with Rishus Bezdin. However, Shalom Rishus Bezdin, I both say, how do I know that even if I took collateral without the Rishus Bezdin, that I still have to go ahead and give it back? Talmud Lomar, Hashev Tashev Mikomakum. Chabal Tachbol. So we'll say again, same idea. The Torah says, Im Chabal Tachbol Samas Ve'echa. Same idea. That Lamaisa Chabal Tachbol, I took it as collateral. How do I know that I have to give it back when he needs it? Eili Ella Shemashachno B'Rishus. This is only if I took it with Rishus. Mashachno Shalo B'Rishus. I don't know that even if I took it without Rishus, I still have to return it when he needs it. Talmud Lomar Chabal Tachbol Mikom Makom. V'hani tarti krai lamali. So we'll say, so here's the question. We seemingly have two psukim that teach me the same exact thing, namely, that when I take collateral, when the debtor needs that collateral, I'm obligated to give it back to him, and then when he no longer needs it, I'm permitted to take it back. Why do I need two psukim that teach me the same thing? Oh, I'll tell you why. One teaches me what? For daytime garments, and one teaches me for nighttime garments. That Rabosai, again, the Torah teaches me that I'm permitted to always go ahead and take the garment at the time that the borrower, that the debtor, does not need it. But at the time that he needs it, I'm obligated to return it to him, and then when he no longer needs it, I'm permitted to take it back. Pasach tiftach. So remember again, it's talking about tzedakah. Torah says, Ki pasach tiftach es yadcha lo, va'avei tavitenu deimach sheyachsar lo. So why does it say pasach tiftach? So listen, it's very important halacha. So I only know that I'm obligated to go ahead and support the aniyim of my own city. How do I know that I'm even obligated to go ahead and support the poor of another city? Talmud Lomar, Pasach Tiftach Mikol Makom. So we'll say, remember, Pasach teaches me the aniyim of my own city. Tiftach teaches me what? The aniyim of other cities. So we'll say, now we know, again, halacha l'maisa, aniyei ircha kodmim, right, that the poor of my own city take precedence over the poor of other cities. But l'maisa, there's still an obligation to help support all aniyim. Nason titain. We'll say, this is amazing. You shall surely give him. Nason titain lo v'lo yira levavcha. So what does this mean? Ainli elamatan meruba. But I only know that I'm obligated to give him a large gift. Matanamu etes minayin. How do I know that I'm obligated even to give him something small? Talmud lomar nason titain mikamakom. Because I will say ultimately, again, I might have thought that I'm obligated to give him something big to make a dramatic difference in the circumstances. How do I know that even if I can't give Ani something big to make a dramatic difference, I'm still obligated to give him something small? Because even something small makes a little bit of a dent. That's the second titain. Also it means if you can give big, give big. Titain means that even if you give something small, give something small. So the Gemara says, Ha'anik Tanik. So listen to this. Hanaka. So remember again, Hanaka is by the Eved Ivri. Eved Ivri goes out after 6 years. Torah you have to give him Hanaka. Hanaka also means you have to give him is amazing. Like almost like a severance package. Like a golden parachute. So when he goes ahead and he leaves servitude, you have to give him Megarncha, Yigvecha. You have to give him from all of your produce. So the Torah says, Ainli Ella, so the Gemara says, Ainli Ella, Shenisbarech Habayis Bigla Lo, Ma'anikim Lo. Lo Nisbarech Habayis Bigla Lo, Minayin. So we'll say, now the Lashon of the Torah is that you have to give him Hanaka. Why? Because your home was blessed as a result of him. So I only know that I have to give an Eved every Hanaka when my home was blessed, meaning when his presence in my home was a good thing. But how do I know that I'm obligated to give him Hanaka even if what? Even if I didn't experience, even if he wasn't such a good worker, or even if I didn't experience a great windfall when he was with me. Talmud lomar ha'anik tanik mikol makom. Torah says ha'anik tanik, you shall surely go ahead and give him no matter what. So tanik lamali. So we'll say, but apparently there is the shita of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah who says no, that when you are obligated to give him Hanaka, only when the household objectively benefited from his presence. But if the household did not benefit from his presence, there is no obligation of Hanaka. If that's the case, then what do we do with the pasuk of Tanik? Dibra Torah kalashon b'nei Adam. Ultimately, again, the Torah is what? The Torah is just using a normal verbiage. Torah is speaking like the way people speak. Fine. So the Gemara goes weiter. Haveit ta'aviten. We're supposed to listen to this. It's actually a very important halacha. So now after we've finished talking about the obligation to give tzedakah, ha'aveit ta'avitenu means you shall also surely lend him money. If somebody needs a loan, you should lend the money. Ein li ela she'ein lo ve'ina rota lehisparnes. So we'll say, Have Taviteno is talking about someone who doesn't have money, but doesn't want to accept tzedakah. So what do we do for such an individual? We convince him to accept the loan. Because hopefully again, he'll accept the loan, and this way again, his dignity is intact. Right? Yeshlo. How do I know that even if a person has money, but for whatever reason he's not willing to support himself, right? Not willing to support himself. People never who are not well. They're not willing to support themselves from their own money. That I should still try to go ahead and what? Give him a loan so that he could be supported. Talmud lomar ta'avitenu mikol makom. Therefore, the Torah says ta'avitenu, which is about to say that even if the guy has his own money, but for some reason, some type of illness, he's not willing to support himself, but he's willing to support himself through other people's money, that you should convince him to take a loan. So the Gemara says ta'avitenu. So we'll say sahavet means that if a person doesn't have, but doesn't want to accept tzedakah, convince him to accept the loan. Tavitenu means if a person does have, but for whatever reason is not willing to spend his own money, so convince him to take a loan so that he can support himself and his family. Or Reb Shimon Da'amar Yesh Lo Ve'ena Rotze L'Hispanis in this talking low. So I will say about according to Reb Shimon who says no. If a person has money, but for some reason some shtuyot he's not willing to support himself, we are not obligated to arrange for loans for such an individual. We're not obligated to give him tzedakah. We're not obligated to go out and be metapel, to get involved with such an individual. So what does ta'avitenu teach us? It teaches us dibra Torah kalashon b'nei Adam. So as according to Reb Shimon, there's really nothing to be learned out from ta'avitenu. Instead, ta'avitenu is just the regular lashon b'nei Adam, is just the way that people normally talk. Haya batal min hasela. So let's begin this sugya. So remember again, the Mishnah said that lamaisa, if let's say again I was working, and then what happened, and then again there's an aveda, and let's say again by stopping to work, so I will go ahead and lose out on a sela. I'll lose out on a sela of income. So I can't go ahead and say, give me the sela that I lost. Rather, the owner of the Aveda pays me like a poel. So the Gemara says, Tnan, no sin lo scharo ke poel batal. So we'll say, so the owner of the Aveda is obligated to compensate me like a poel batal. My poel batal. So we'll say, what does it mean like a poel batal? Right? Poel batal means literally like somebody who's paid, meaning like somebody who's paid not to do anything. So when I buy, no. Ki poel batal shall osa malacha te batal minei. Rather, we'll say what it means is, if I look at Rashi, ki poel batal shall osa malacha te batal minei. Kama adam rota litol ulefachos mischaro li batal mi malacha zu kevelo shu osik ba v'la'asok b'malacha kala kizu. So we'll say, listen to this. The way we pay the person is the following. So let's say I'm working, but my job pays me a lot of money, but it also has a lot of effort. How much money would a person be willing to accept for a job that requires less effort? So everybody has days like this, right? Where you go ahead and you say to yourself, you know what? I would go ahead and I see that guy's job. I would make less money to have less stress. So the Gemara says over here, so how much would a person go ahead and how much less money would a person accept in order to have less stress? So a less stressful job. So the assumption is over here that returning in Aveda is a less stressful job. So Lamaisa, again, how much less money would I be willing to accept in order for that? So that's the amount ultimately, again, that it pays into. So just look at that Rashi for just 1 second. So Rashi says, Kama Adam Rotza Litol, how much would a person be willing to accept for Livchos Mischaro, and it go ahead and diminish his income, Libatal Mimalacha Zu Kiveda Shu Osek Ba, in order to go ahead and stop doing this work that he's currently engaged in, that's an intense malacha, for La'asok B'malacha Kala Kazu, and only go ahead and engage in a lesser intense malacha, like this one being the returning of an Aveda, Hakol Lefi Kovet HaMalacha. We'll say all is in accordance with the intensity of the work, V'ribu Ischar, and the amount of return. So essentially what we say is the following. Assuming the guy made a lot of money from his malacha, the assumption also is that's because he worked hard. So how much less money would he be willing to accept for a low pressure job? That's the amount of money that we compensate him ultimately for taking time out of his high pressure job in order to go ahead and return the Aveda. Alright, we'll stop over here for today. Shkoyach. I'm sorry?